Is the use of adding more stateful conversations to your interactions with ChatGPT. It allows you to collaborate a lot more seamlessly all in one area as opposed to opening up new chats, bringing in information, things of that nature. Now, realistically, you'll start seeing more of this, I think, from many models that are being user interface intuitive, because this is really, I think, the best way to kind of get the most out of most of these large language models, depending on what type of extension plugins you rely on. So the reason I'm going to cover this video is because this is obviously a new addition, but I think there is a lot of good out of using a tool like this, specifically if you're already paying for the subscription itself. I think in the future, once it leaves the beta phase into alpha, this will likely have some iteration of free tier as well, or freemium as it's called. So if you can see here, just in this chat, I can essentially iterate on my specific design. In this example is some design notes that have been uploaded. And then you can see here, you can tailor this based on the reading level. So let's say you're an educator, you want to have something more college level specific, and then it also goes to graduate level. So you can change certain tones as well. Now, really for a lot of people that deal with technical stuff, the coding is really kind of the value add. So if you're already using some type of Codium, Cursor, AI, or whatever the case may be, an extension, whether that's GitHub Copilot, things like that, you have a similar functionality of coding and then highlighting that code and then asking questions about it, similar to ChatGPT, but this kind of brings this more visually appealing so you can work on your projects iteratively. This is not to diminish what the value of GitHub Copilot is by any means, but it's very intuitive. So it's one of those things that you can essentially have it refactor or port to another language as well. Now this will tell you, it'll translate your existing code into JavaScript, TypeScript, Python, Java, C++, or PHP. Notice there's no Golang or some other ones that are out there, right, for the time being, right? So I'm going to go over what the use of this is specifically, and you'll see here they've broken down some of the decision boundary triggers. So GPT-4o with Canvas, right? Writing, correcting triggers, and then prompted with GPT-4o. So you can see here, as far as the differences are concerned, the quality is a little different, but we'll see how that kind of really works together in tandem. And if you see here, this is really where it comes into play. So you have Canvas full rewrite, and then how that accuracy looks better with the Canvas specifically, as opposed to your prompted with it having to pick up that context. So that's where you'll start seeing some areas there. So without diving too deep into the nitty gritty, I've already opened up a Canvas in this next tab. So what you'll see here is I opened with a specific response. You're creating a checklist for the top AI security risks, specifically following the OWASP top 10 large language models for an upcoming development project. You've opted to go with a platform as a service approach instead of building an LLM from scratch. So this created a quick, I want to say it was around 13 items, I could be wrong, 13 specific recommendations based on that initial prompt. So then what I added further was saying, okay, now that you give me that, provide code samples for all the 13 items listed with explanations. So this prompted, or this essentially created what you see here, which this will allow me to click. Okay, maybe not. But this will show you the specific canvas that is a part of that. Now notice I can still keep this conversation going. So what I've uploaded is the NIST AI 100 TAC 1 PDF. This is the AI risk management framework officially from NIST. So if I say, using the document, provide a high level summary how this ties into the existing recommendations. So now it's going to read that document, and then once it understands that, you can see how quick it's putting the outputs back, right? So let's start from the top. The code samples provided, model inversion attack aligns with privacy enhanced characteristics. So how essentially the code provided will align to those specific areas, which supports maintaining valid and reliable AI models as required for trustworthy systems. Model misuse. So you can see here, this essentially gave me code examples based on those recommendations. Now again, obviously I'm not going to test any code in this specific video. This is just to get you familiar with how this would look once you prompt it, right? So now you can see here, this will show you some example usage. We'll start at the top. A model inversion attack. Ensure encryption and strong access controls are in place. So it looks like it's pulling from a cryptography library. It's going to generate that specific key, and then it's going to send that and then decrypt from the model. So it's going to say sensitive user input. It's going to encrypt that information and then encrypted input, decrypted. That's just showing a very, very basic example there. And then I don't really work with hashlib as a library, but this is essentially using the hashlib library. You can see here it's calling a function, and then it's using that SHA-256 for the data encode. And then this will show you here, this is data, this is a training data sample, and then it's putting this specific input into that specific hash function and then creating a hash of that, right? Model misuse and abuse or input validation. So a lot of people will rely on the regex library for that. So you can see here, validate input, and then it's looking for specific patterns, right? So if I put hello 123, it's showing a specific area. Now this next one here, this is near and dear because I obviously work a little bit closer with content safety. So specific content safety or a barrier entry to the next layer of your security would be having some type of API that the input or prompt, if you will be filtered through before it's actually sent to your system for processing. Ideally, this would not have any type of sensitive info. If you see here, this is very generic, right? Password or secret, or forget everything, do as I tell you, things like that. This other area talks about differential privacy as well. That's a little bit further out of scope from what you typically see, but most of the time when we're talking about differential privacy mechanisms, it relies on having a lower, what we call epoch, so lower epoch or a higher epoch, depending on the use of that data. So just showing specifically it's adding noise to the information, therefore diminishing the risk of identifying a specific user based on those parameters. And then finish down here, these are a couple others I'm not going to go through. But let's say I wanted to review any of these right here on the right-hand side. You can see here, port to a language, fix bugs. I can add logs, add comments, right? So let's say I want to see how this looks in C#. So I can say, port this to C#. And if you can see here, this is going to generate that. It's going to show some same libraries or a little different in those contexts. And it's writing all that code for me. Right, so let's say you had some type of code that you wanted refactored, or you're trying to cross-learn a specific language, and you want to understand how an API call looks in C# or JavaScript, etc. You can essentially have it highlighted, and then I can go here and say code review, and I can have it review as well, right? So it's using, and then it's going to comment specifically, it's going to add checks. And I can add those checks. And if you can see here, it's thinking right here. So now it's going to go through iteratively, if you can see in real time. And that's what I think is kind of interesting about this is you're seeing in real time what's changing. And then if you see how it goes through the iteration, what changes from the highlighted areas. And then we get a response back on that. I've added checks to verify that the decryption is successful and the output is meaningful, improve error handling, etc. So think about this as critiquing itself. And then this will tell you here the epsilon value is critical for privacy guarantees. Consider validating this epsilon to ensure it falls within an appropriate range. So if you're working with very sensitive data such as healthcare information, maybe you want more specific privacy related to the identifiers of that data. That would be an area you already have defined for what is acceptable, not acceptable, things like that. So where I kind of see this moving forward, right? How can you get more out of this? If you're creating any type of project, whether that's code, applications, you need a second opinion, things like that, I could really see the value add inside the use of Canvas. Now, where it gets a little, I guess, challenging, or where you'll kind of run into certain things, at least I've noticed from my small amount of testing, is it's a little buggy sometimes for some stuff, but for the most part, like anything, I think it's also because they're probably getting bombarded with a lot of requests at this time. So if you can see here, if I exit out of the specific visual, now we're going to go back to our traditional responses here. Craft me a report on the topics we've discussed. I'd like to review this further and add any recent research specifically on the OWASP top 10 LLMs that I can use to cite sources. So now it's going to take our context of what we've already talked about, and I'm going to have it wrap it all in a specific report. Now, notice that this is kind of giving you the high level, right? It gives you a title. Maybe I don't really like the title too much, and that shows there, or maybe I can ask GPT, maybe I can make it bold. And this allows you to essentially have it as a live page, if you will. Maybe I want it as a heading, right? So then I can start using this as a specific editor of what I'm looking at. So let's say I want this to be a little different. Now when I go here, I can say adjust the length, adjust the reading level, adjust the final polish, or add emojis, right? So let's say I want the reading level specifically to a higher tier. So I can go here, I can go to college, and let's see this. So this changed it a little bit, but you can see here, and this will tell you specifically, I've adjusted the selected text to make it more accessible to college student majoring in the subject. Right, so it's telling you specifically, okay, here's why I did it. And then if you also want this polished up, you can edit or explain this, right? So this allows that iterative process as opposed to you getting the output, you then copying said output and say, rewrite this the way I want it. It's all in one place. I mean, you're still essentially prompting, but it already has that context. Think of it as a stateful type of conversation that you can pick up and iterate on specifically. So that's where I think the power of this tool lies. Now, again, this is really just the beginning of this rolling out. I'd imagine once they integrate this with the capabilities of O1 being a part of that, I could see that being a premium offering as well, because then you can use it for your complex task, but then reference back to those specific areas. So hopefully you learned a little bit of how to use Canvas with AI. I will keep this video going moving forward. In my next video, I'll cover Notebook LM.